Uh,
Welcome. We are here with Rob Archer, one of my favorite humans on the planet, CEO of Codebase Coworking, and we'll let him tell us about Rob, you're a professor, right?
no, well, I spent some time doing adjunct work in the engineering school here at the University of Virginia. Yep.
Prof. Archer, and a business owner, and many other things. So we'll get into all of that. But you're in Charlottesville, Virginia. How many years have you been open now?
4 years. But it's been an 8-year project because
Right.
2 years of planning.
Yeah.
It's a entire building project, right? So I started on the development team with the eye on running this business, but it was 2 years of planning, 2 years of construction, and we've been open a little over 4 years.
I don't think I'd have the patience for that.
Well, it's been a
Well,
lot of fun. The entire time was fun, right?
Okay.
And it started to build in terms of my full-time capacity,
Mhm.
obviously. And during that time, I was teaching and operating, working with my wife in her catering business and some other retail endeavors, and then some real estate construction projects outside of just specific to the code building project and code-based co-working. So lots of stuff to keep me busy. But this was a really just an amazing project because of the scale and the mission and the why of the building, in addition to the why of the co-working business.
I think we want to hear about it. Give us a little background, and then Gio's going to get personal really fast, I can tell. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
well, before he
That's what
does
we
that, I
do.
want to say, 8 years of working on this, but he's got several decades of hospitality, and it's obvious. So I think that's part of it too, is there's a foundation that's allowed for him to make Codebase so successful. But go.
No, you're right. We've been in this community here for quite a while. Charlottesville is unique in that, a lot of folks that end up going to school here will come back. And so there's this come back and retire type of mentality that happens here. And so I was here undergraduate school in the 80s. I had a couple of different touch points because I was a student athlete. And then 5 years, 5.5 years after graduating from undergrad, came back, and my girlfriend then, wife now, we started a frozen yogurt business, which was a part of the community here for 23 years. And so that was our touch to just the university community in general. Shortly after we opened, or actually a year after, I went back to business school. So we call that, a double who if you went to the University of Virginia twice. My wife and I are double who's. But again, that was another deeper connection point to classmates that have done all kinds of cool things and the connection to the community. Then, in addition to that, we were group exercise instructors at one of the popular clubs here in town, who we've, have known the founder of that facility for several years. And again, that was, you're connected to the community when you're connected from a retail standpoint, and then also from, a fitness and a leisure standpoint, I guess. We've raised our 4 kids here, and during that time, I was that dad that couldn't sit on the sideline, so I was coaching football, did a lot of youth sports coaching, football, basketball, and lacrosse. And so another connection point to several folks in this community. And that was, so we were just known quantities, I think, here in the community. And that was a sort of a logical step towards, someone who has been involved in business projects and retail projects in the community. And then, of course, I've been connected to some people that have resources that are just amazing and outstanding, and want to see the community grow in healthy ways and do a lot for the community. And that's, again, how I got to sort of this place is through relationship with our owner and his family office, with the mission of being able to bring something neat to Charlottesville. This is a LEED Platinum building. The entire sort of footprint and space is about 276,000 square feet, of which 20,000 square feet is shared workspace, which was built with the base building. But the idea is we're going to construct this amazing building that can be designed to attract talent into the Charlottesville community. And so our community continues to grow. There's a lot of early stage company growth, which is cool. I remember as an undergrad, the word entrepreneur didn't exist, but now one of the things that I think about very carefully is where do we sit in the Central Virginia entrepreneurial ecosystem? And then as a result of all of those things, I get to serve on some boards that think about economic development, and then also teach young people frameworks that are about getting an early stage company, doing some customer discovery, and maybe launching. So we've been able to get connected to lots of cool people. And I'd love to tell you how great I am, but it's not me, I mean, I can't control timing of things. And so I think, we've been divinely appointed in certain ways to be able to connect people and do things that it's been a lot of fun. So I like people. That's the sort of I think the underpinning basis for a lot of this. And I would like to think I'm an encourager. And so those things work well sort of in a co-working business. When you're a little bit of the engine here, right? This doesn't scale real well if you're an engine. I've learned that the hard way in retail spaces and retail business that, if you are the engine, then you probably work in your business more than you may work on your business. But you will need to work on your business if you're going to set up systems that can scale or processes that would allow you to sort of step away from day-to-day operations. But
Well, I don't like calling people a liar, but I'm going to call you a fibber from the standpoint of you saying that you're not the reason that place is successful. And yes, you have an amazing team, but I got to see firsthand your passion for people and how you brought people together, right? I mean, we didn't walk by one person that you didn't know their name, their story. You had a nickname for them, Vladimir, and all kinds of stuff. And so it was so great to watch your interaction, which is what brings these spaces together, right? It's our interaction with the community, it's our connection with people. And you did that too. I mean, even from the standpoint of Jamie. So when I was there was actually a real estate class of students from the university that toured the space that I got to tag along on the back end and watch, and just to see the interaction. It's easy to see why the space does as well as it does.
Those things are a lot of fun, right? When I get to host students here for whatever it is, whether in the event space, the UVA women's soccer team is going to have a banquet, or whether we're having a Charlottesville Entrepreneurs and Espresso meetup, or any one of the many things that we would touch with the community. And I do a lot of stuff with the student athletes as well. And so for students to be able to see a place like this it's a little different, right? I would imagine if as an undergrad, while there's some really cool construction happening over in the university area, this is a neat sort of space to look at.
And it's a real hub that was missing before, right? Like it's kind of on the square and it just didn't exist. I mean, it's an incredible project. And it does, when you were talking about what you've done and then aligning with the project, I was like, man, they couldn't have written a job description to match you any better. It's just like, to your point, it's like divine matching there. Right time, right place. But it's magical for you to kind of step into that at this point in your life. I had no idea you were a fitness instructor, by the way. I think I missed that along the way. That's hilarious.
Well, like 20 something years.
Wait, what did you teach?
This is back in the day, step class.
Nice.
My kids are often said, Dad, Mom, get that VHS tape out of you guys with that step video.
Mom's got some leg warmers on and
there's a whole thing. Yeah. But yeah, it was all kinds of cool stuff, club and core conditioning, boxing, body pump was a new thing then, right? You remember, slide, there was a slide thing. You remember that? put on the little booties and you
Wait, have
slide.
he and Derek been in the same room together? I don't either. There would be like an explosion.
No, that's what I was saying. I didn't realize that either, but I'm like, now even more reason to connect the two
And
of
they're
them.
both like, and I do this, and I do this, and I, like multi-passionate entrepreneurs for sure. I need to be there when this happens. I think we need to facilitate this. I mean, you already have, but
I tried. It's been happening.
good.
But I mean, I think, full transparency, when I walk into spaces, I immediately start looking at stuff, and I walk into a space like yours, I'm like, how's this thing making money? Right? Because of the lack in my mind, I have a lack of efficiency, right?
Mhm.
You got a lot of butts in seats that aren't monetized, right? It's not like a dedicated desk or, more importantly, an office. But then to walk around and to see the community interact, to see people actually engaging. And then we walked up, Jamie, you'll get a kick out of this. We walked up on a conversation where two guys were going back and forth of, I just don't even know how I'd become a presidential Diamond Elite member. And I'm thinking they're talking about like Delta Airlines or something like that. Well, no, the problem is he's got a waiting list for offices. And so it's like he's running this Ponzi scheme where he gets them to go from like members to then you got to go to a dedicated desk, and then you wait for the right time to see if maybe potentially you are good enough to get a chance to take an office. And so we sat there, interacted with this guy, and I was just laughing inside because I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, because the guy's like literally like, man, Rob, I just don't understand. How do I become a presidential diamond, double, quadruple elite diamond club member? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it was just hilarious. Go ahead.
Just
Sorry.
remind me, I need to pay him for that.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Wait, but this is a good question. Does the space need to make money? So family office, strategic, kind of charter, you've got, other things in the building that you're supporting. What's the goal for the space?
Well, the goal really is to, create this space with these amenities that they're affordable for, you wouldn't necessarily spend this kind of money on yourself in terms of how things are designed. And so there's that part of the giving to the community in that regard. Now, in terms of being fiscally responsible, I will look at the space, and we have a lot of open space and a lot of things that are in the design that make you feel a certain way in terms of being productive. But your fiscal responsibility would suggest that I've got to look at ways in which, like, I will look at a seat in open space and I'll say, I can't charge for that seat because there's no particular work area where it's a lounge seating. It's really nice. And then I'll look over here at a seat where it's open space, where it's at a desk, right? And it's, it's steel case chair and such, right? So, but I can charge for that seat. And so I should, in the performers that I was building, looking at what is the maximum revenue that could be generated, and then work with that as my marker, if you will, right? And so just because it really, there's an interesting part of the building. This is a shape of a triangle, right, with a fountain in the middle. And so what you tell students, particularly if you're designing something, you want to maximize leasable square footage, you build a rectangle or a square, right? I mean, but if you are looking at creating a legacy building, this is LEED Platinum with a design element that's really, really special, then those things are a little different. But that doesn't release you from, as someone who has managed businesses, from being financially or fiscally responsible. What that does say is that you need to sort of change your metrics and measurement, maybe, right? And so one of the things that, Gio, you were talking about is like, we just don't have we could have density here if it was designed that way. Well, I have 38 private offices, and of course there's a waiting list, but I could have more if you took out some of the open space areas. We have a dedicated outdoor air system. Again, our owner is a data scientist, and so lots of studies that track cognitive performance with fresh air. So we have fresh air in all the spaces all the time. Well, what does that really mean in terms of, if you're in real estate, you understand that you recycle the air in a commercial space for a reason, right? Because you bring in, what was it, 30 degrees outside, and what's the humidity? And then you're going to just dump that into your space inside. You have to deal with it. You're going to have to filter it. You have to condition it. And so we actually have a really cool building automation system that sits between, the spaces, conditioning spaces, such that we can efficiently exchange the energy and the filtering that has to happen as you take fresh air, bring it into the space, and also as you exhaust air. So there's elements in the design process that funny story, I think it's a funny story. I had lots of questions as I joined the team, and every time I asked a question, one of our development team presidents and folks that have known for a long, long time would slide the sheet of paper over to me. That's yours now. You can figure that one out, right? Or had questions, and any questions that had to do with something technical, because I'm just wired that way as a, I guess, engineer. And I'd ask a question and then get assigned to understanding how that actually works a little bit more. And again, great design group and a wonderful construction partner, but it was fun to learn about those things and how they all work. So, and if you're hooking up as a tenant, because it's essentially now I'm a tenant in our project here, when you are building out a space, you have to think about what your MEPs look like and your cost to hook up mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And those costs change when you have complicated systems to connect to. And so some of the upper floor tenants, if you will, are, bought into the wellness part of what happens here in the building. And they understand that, those costs are a little higher, if you will, to be able to participate or to do your upfits. And, again, that does limit the, the type of tenant that you will have here in this space. But it's a really cool thing. And it's as in terms of marketing, this is a different segment of the market than you may generally see in a sort of a ordinary, if you will, no disrespect, commercial building, or maybe an older building, right? So anyway, long answer, but it really is, that's what's been so much fun, is this, to learning all these new things and being able to share some of that with people in a way that's meaningful, particularly as COVID. We came out of COVID out the gate, with a lot of people that were happy to, ready to get back into some sort of office environment, if you will. And with the space that we have and fresh air and such, that actually made it a little bit easier for us to launch out of COVID, if you will, because COVID was pretty much an accelerant for us in the process here. And in addition to having some great mentorship, Jamie, yourself, and like Bill Bennett and folks that were just kind enough to, I could take a piece of paper and say, here's what we're thinking. And you guys are like, why are you thinking about that? What about this? And what about that? And we had enough runway to be able to make changes. We started this process of sitting down and learning and working with associations long before we were actually, well before we had plenty of time to be able to make changes should we need to, right?
So where does the foundation of your servant leadership and just passion for people, I mean, where was that instilled to you growing up with your family, or at what point because I mean, it's not something that comes easy, right? For you, it's very genuine. For some people, it's strained, but it's extremely generous with you and genuine.
I like people generally. I mean, also been in the retail business for 23 years where we were serving customers, but that was a little easier.
What's the name of the ice cream shop?
Frozen yogurt business, right? You're in frozen yogurt. People generally are coming with a, happy, right? So it's not like I had to sort of twist anybody's arm into getting their favorite flavor, if you will. But I also think that there's an element of somehow you got to be wired to serve, I think, in a way. We've always, enjoyed serving customers and trying to make people smile. I do know that, we have lots of challenges in this world, and if you can be a light, that would be helpful. And so, I've been wired to be more optimistic than pessimistic, which is, I think some of those are God-given traits.
Did you know that 50% of happiness is genetic?
Wow.
Right?
I-
Yeah. So like you said, it
Right.
is partly wired. I find that to be, I don't know. I don't know what I would have thought about it. I don't know if I would have thought it was really genetic, but it is.
I mean, and then I think you can also feed, what you feed is important too, right?
Yeah.
I think about, I've just like a lot of people, I mean, I'll speak for myself. There's a selfish part of me, right? There's a, prideful part of me. And so there's an element of maybe trying not to feed those things that would tend to separate me from good relationships with people. We often talk about, I have a pastor who's a good friend of mine who teaches a lot of leadership. There's a lot of leadership training. And, what he will say is that, relationships are the essence of life. And then from a faith perspective, it's relationship with God and then relationship with people. And if it's outside of a faith conversation, it's still relationship with people because, I got to deal with you every day, right? And that's what people are saying about me, right? So, but that's interesting to understand the science if that's a hardwired.
Yeah. Like I guess your set point, because the way obviously you can go, up or down based on a lot of things, choices. But
Now I
yeah.
think that, the upbringing has got to have something to do with that, right? I was really, my mom and dad were very supportive, always was very positive, in terms of yes, you can. And so oftentimes when I heard no a lot, from, when it was time to switch from engineering to marketing, engineers can't work in sales and marketing. It's like, really? Okay. Or you're going to leave your job at IBM to go open up a yogurt stand? Right. But those are, sometimes you could see things as challenges that you want to try to go after. But again, I'd love to tell you how great I am, but you can't control timing and those that you don't choose your parents. And I've been really, really, really fortunate to have a great group of friends who have been encouraging. And the people that we've met along the way have been just outstanding. So that's.
Yeah, so it's nature and nurture, right? I mean, Jamie, you'll find this funny. So I chose to drive from Charlotte up to DC for meetings because I wanted to stop in Charlottesville and see Rob because it's 4 hours from Charlotte to Charlottesville, and
Oh,
then it's
that's
another
it.
2 hours from
Okay.
Charlottesville to Northern Virginia. And so I had it perfectly planned, right? I dropped off Zach at the airport at 11. I had to stop for a call to kick off a webinar for GWA. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get there right about 4:30. I'm going to spend, or little 4. I said, I'm going to spend an hour and a half with Rob, Max, right? We'll do an hour of tours. And then I was like, let's go get a drink. And then I'm on the road by 5:30. I'm at my hotel by 7:30, ready to go work out. So I get there and immediately the Rob show starts, right? He's wheeling and dealing and talking to everyone. And then the professor walks up, was like, oh, wait, we're going to do tours in a minute. He's like, well, let's do a tour and then let's you and I tour and then you can join us for a tour with the students. So we do that. And I'm following along as he's explaining everything. And at the end, he puts me on the spot and makes me talk to them. And I'm just like,
That was cool.
which it was awesome because we were talking about real estate. I've got a master's in real estate. We were able to talk about the industry for a bit. And then we go up to his office to grab his stuff and his Bible's open on his desk. So needless to say, I left there at 7:30, 7:45. We never even left his office to go get a drink. He happened to have one of his clients in the space has a company that basically does mixed drinks in a can. So he had some in his refrigerator. But it was funny. We spent an hour and a half up there talking that I had no intention of spending with him. And it wasn't necessarily faith-based, but it was about how we get to serve people-based. And I mean, I think it's a combination of, again, nature and nurture and what we feed our our minds and our bodies, right? But I think it was so cool to experience that for 2 hours with him and then be like, oh, I understand it a little bit better now. And
So it
so
was
it was
fun.
cool.
It was fun hanging out.
It was.
And then he still drove 2 hours and worked out when he got to the hotel.
Well, it's horrible. This is exactly what happened. I don't think I told you, Rob. So I stopped and I hadn't had dinner or lunch now that I think of it. So I stopped and got a smooth.
I didn't
Jamie
eat.
already knows.
That has
Very
never
unhealthy.
happened to me before. I cannot compute people who do not eat.
Well, I didn't expect to be part of the Rob Archer show. I mean, you can't turn that down.
There's like a restaurant in the lobby. There's like what is it? Like a taco place or what? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
my host didn't
Anyway.
offer me tacos in the taco place. And so either way, I pulled into Northern Virginia at 10. And I'm about to take my exit and I look over and I see the lights from Lifetime Fitness and I'm like, no. So I make a U-turn and I rolled my little bag in, changed, worked out for an hour 15 and got to the hotel at 11:30.
Dude.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Those 11:30 days are, although there's been a little bit of that with the March Madness, but
Oh, I'm sure.
that's not usual my norm. I'm usually sleeping. I don't even want to say, I'm embarrassed to say what time.
You'd be in good company with me,
It'd
Rob.
be a good Jamie goes to bed early and then she starts texting at like 4:30 in the morning. And I'm like, it's 6:30 my time. I used to be like, she's not up. And then I'm like, she's up. She's already done 3.5 wads by now.
No.
Got to start your day right. That's all I'm saying. And then I'd eat some tacos. Okay, so tell me about you met your wife and decided to open a yogurt shop. Why was she the one?
Oh, goodness. We met in the weight room. She was also on the track team, but a couple years younger. And that was in 1984.
Ooh,
Right. And so
prime leg warmer season. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we became friends and we were friends and we stayed friends and
Was this an undergrad? Or
undergrad.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was, ask people, what were you doing in 1984?
Yeah.
And some people were just a twinkle.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, we met. We've been married 32 years. And so we met, I think we dated, I think she said the number's 8 years, but we were friends for 8 years prior to getting married. So
Yeah.
yeah, the years go by.
All right, tell us about the kiddos.
So we have 4 kids. Oldest is 27, youngest is 19. And so 2 boys and 2 girls. And that has been just, a lot of fun in terms of being connected again to lots of folks in the community because of the sports and such that we did. I had a speed camp for a while there. We ran track, but our kids didn't. It was more about lacrosse for our kids because that's a really popular sport here in the community. And when my oldest son decided he wasn't going to play soccer anymore, at age 4 or 5 or whatever, we were like, we got to do something. And I was like, let's see, the YMCA has something. Oh, it's lacrosse. Okay, cool. And we'll pick a school that's close to where we live. And as it turns out, that's, that particular private school is like a powerhouse for lacrosse. And again, because some of these folks that were at the school were customers and people that we sort of knew in the community, I had learned the game of lacrosse from these people who had played the game. And so that became another big connection point. And then all of our kids really enjoyed playing lacrosse. Like I've got one that's a first year playing lacrosse at Lemoyne College in Syracuse. And then my daughter went to Temple for 2 years to play lacrosse there. And then she transferred to Virginia Tech and played on the club team. And so, sports is a great sort of metaphor for life. And when you have good coaches or coaches that care, coaches can speak into the lives of the young people. So I was actually head coach for our high school where my kids went to high school I was the head lacrosse coach for 2 years. as we had an opportunity, it was a transition that needed to happen. And so I sort of stepped in and filled in for a couple of years there. And again, a lot of that's really about encouraging young people, which is something I like to do as well. So anyway, lots of stuff.
Okay, look, how about what's your walkout song?
Yeah,
There you
Gio.
go.
No, don't ask
That was
me.
you.
Oh,
Mine's Enter Sandman, by the way. Kirk gave me that years ago, and I do like it.
we
Oh.
Well, rob
Okay.
you, rob you.
oh, man, that's a whole nother sort of interesting
Wait, so you were
center seeing Queen perform.
yeah. Oh,
80s. Wow.
taking you back.
Take you back.
What's next on the horizon? I mean, you're years in now. What's next?
Well, I think a question that I like to wrestle with a little bit is how do I maybe activate some underutilized spaces, if you will? And I'll give you an example. Well, we've added just recently some phone booths, right? And so I have some areas where I can do that, and that can help, if you will, lift a bottleneck for when, the busy days when, a lot of people are on calls and such. Our co-working etiquette is, if you're going to have a substantial call or conversation, use one of the nooks and crannies that we have, or a phone booth. And so we have these beautiful phone booths that have been designed that are part of the building, if you will. And then now just of having added 2 phone booths that I'm going to see how that works. And so there's an opportunity to use some open space areas, fill those with a phone booth or the larger booths. I also have a reception area that faces, you remember this, faces the theater. So we have a 207 seat theater, but there is right across from that entrance in co-working, we designed that as a lobby desk, if you will, sort of a reception.
Yep.
Area. And that's not what we use it for now. It sort of made some sense in the design early on. And I may turn that into a private office. Recently, I had a printer copy room that was set up in essentially like an office, and I've converted that to an office and then moved the printer work area on the other side of the space on the second level. So how do I activate underutilized spaces to be able to add members comfortably, if you will, right? So that's always fun. Is there a possibility that there could be another location? Maybe. I always still think of us as a one-off, but there are demographics in sort of areas not too far here that could work. But again, that's the circumstances around those have to be relatively special, right? And so it's not sort of a classic where you're looking at actively opening spaces maybe as quickly as you can, or on a sort of a regimented schedule. And that's good and bad. But generally speaking, I would think that healthy things tend to grow. And so if you are experiencing health, you probably will be growing, right? I think that's a sort of design in the world system, right? But that's a really good question. Now, where I do find lots of fulfillment is when we're helping people, right? And so helping here sometimes means that people leave, right? If we're working with early stage companies, we have probably 6-7% of the companies here are pre-revenue. And so if they get to the point of finding funding or finding customers that allow them to sort of scale and go to the next level, then they might leave us. And so, but that's
then you've got the Super Diamond Platinum member who's waiting in the wings to get that spot. So
You got to tell him about the guy that you kicked out of his office that he never used, but he was paying.
Yeah,
I think
no,
this
and
says a lot about the community you're building.
Well, in a classic sort of real estate, you would, the best tenant you can have is somebody that doesn't use the space, but pays on time, right? And signs up for several years, right? but I had a gentleman who was in a prime time location who didn't use the space much at all, and I had to reach out to him. And one, I was more like, hey, are you okay? And then it was, okay, so you are okay, but let's figure out a way where maybe it would be more efficient for your use of funds to be a member without taking up a high in demand prime time office that everybody looks at every day and like, what's going on in there? And so, yeah, I was, it was a weirdly bummer, but because I just want to always help people by saying yes, but at that particular situation, it made sense for, I had to like, but yeah, that was weird. But that was about a little over a year ago, I think. Yeah, it was about a year ago.
I think it's really actually special and very indicative of the culture when you're really focused not on how much will someone pay me for that office, because you could have had a bidding war for that office, but you're like, well, I just want someone who comes most of the time because it's about the community and it's about the culture and we need people to be here. Because that's not always the case. Sometimes you have 100 offices and you just need them to be filled,
Yes.
and you're more concerned about the ramp and the seat rate. And I love it when you can look past that and say, no, we want people who are here and engaged.
Yeah, no, that would be completely different
Yeah.
if you had 100 offices, right? And you need to get people in seats. Gio and I, we were having a conversation earlier about, customers in a more general business sense. You're thinking about customers and you need to get people in the seats, right? And so because customers, you can see that they have a lifetime value, if you have to give a little bit here on the front end, that's totally fine. And if you have to justify it economically, then you can think of it with, the LTV model, if you will, where customers have a lifetime value. And so, but also, the relationships, because we've had people leave and then come back, right? Which is always neat too. And so you want to leave in someone's mind, a very positive review of your space in their mind, so that if they're talking to people, this is a very word of mouth community, you want to have high marks, if you will. So anyway, yes.
Yes,
You guys are
yes,
awesome.
and
You guys
yes.
are awesome. You help so many people.
Staffing wise, let's talk about that.
Okay.
How do you keep, you have a pretty decent sized team. Obviously, you're also running the front desk that is doing the hospitality for the entire stack, right? It's not just for your space.
So, the way it's designed is interesting, right? Because you walk into the lobby, and the lobby area is all public, right? And so,
Right.
are connected to this project a couple of restaurants and a coffee shop, so that people can come into the lobby area and engage or eat, and then oftentimes we'll use that space as a function area, a pre-function, or for an event. But as you come to the lobby to enter the doors of the co-working, there is one lobby desk, and that desk actually serves upper floor tenants in addition to the shared workspace community, right? So, but as you walk in, you wouldn't necessarily know that. And so that's where it seems it's a little bit of a confusion from a design standpoint. But on the right side, as you're facing the lobby, that's really co-working. So that's the Codebase lobby reception, if you will. And then on the left side is the building. So, but it is a little bit interesting because you can't have somebody sitting there all the time without ever having to take a break or something, right? So there is overlapping coverages that have to happen. And so we do have mail package handling here too. So that, because that door is actually locked, you've got to be able to give access to those that are either delivering packages or people that are, if you say, virtual members, where they're just getting their mail and packages. Yes, interesting. Yes. So having a staff person there, and then have a community manager really does run a lot of the operations in terms of doing many tours and helping with the metrics that go with running our operational software, which is Office R&D. And then I have someone who handles all the finance pieces. And then it's me. So there's one, and then actually there's another gentleman who helps with coverage overlaps when we need some overlap. And then we like to show members we love them by snacking them to death. So there's refilling snacks and ordering that always has to be done. There's a lot of little things, this is hospitality, right? So, I intentionally want to go to the different restrooms, if you will, because you want to be able to make sure that everything is everything, right? And, I like to manage by walking around too, right? So I like to encourage that with the team. One, so that we can engage with people. But two, also, you want to make sure everything's working right and everything's clean. On the personal side, when people trust you, they will invite you into conversations that are really, really meaningful, right? You members that are dealing with issues with their children or cancer or folks in my peer group are elderly parents, so being able to be an encouragement and help is by having the right team in place. They can do that. And I like to try to model that. But then it also frees me up to be able to spend the time that sometimes is required, when people have needs.
All right.
Sorry, that was an insight as to how my mind works. So there's dots that connect. So,
Yeah, that was
all
a
right.
tough
Well,
question.
We'll put you on the spot next time in person.
yes. Well, when
Karaoke.
Let's
meeting?
Gio already did. Charlottesville is not like close to a lot of things, to be fair.
BC.
You
Like-
were worth it to me, Rob Archer. You were worth it to me.
Ooh,
And,
that's
and
right
I've
there.
and I've never worked or made a dime off of you or really even knew you, but you'd made enough of an impression in me at the events that I was
Okay.
like, I gotta go see a brother.
I know. I got to put it back on the list. Okay, fair.
Good.
Well, I'll come for the, Derek Bronny Rob meeting.
Nice.
Keep me on that invite for sure. Yeah. Okay, let's let this guy go. We're totally over time here. It's happy hour. It's happy hour
He
time.
kept me over last time, so
Yeah, no, this is fun for me. If it's can be an encouragement to anyone, that'd be great. And, like I said, I like to be helpful if I can. And a lot of folks have helped us along the way. And so it just is my pleasure to be able to reciprocate if I can, right?